Actually going to try to type into YouTube right now. So yeah, there is a little bit of echo on your side, David, but I don't think it's anything bad. Echo on your side, David, but I don't think it's anything bad. Interesting, the live feed automatically goes in. Right. All right. So, hello everybody. How you doing? This is the fourth session of GVDS Presents, or the Global Virtual Design Sprint Presents. This is a daily series that we're having in the month of October to feature some of the best and brightest in the design sprint discipline, and also some leaders in innovation and design thinking that I know of in my network, and also of those that I've come across in kind of doing the work that I do in virtual sprints. Today, I have two particular people that I know fairly well, I would say. I think I'm confident to say so. There is Lee Duncan from IBM, and there is David Magdaleno. I want to say your name right, because I've been screwing it up in the registration and not typing it correctly, from Crystal Cove Consulting. And these two have kind of teamed up to do a podcast called Experiences of Insight. And the caliber of the guests that they've had recently has been really impressive. I think the last one you did with Ross Chapman, I haven't heard people stop talking about it since it happened. Lots of people have been kind of commenting on it. But one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is that I think both of you have some incredible insight into both the design thinking space and design sprints, and how they're actually applied. So I'm thrilled to have you both here. Rather than me kind of expound upon your collective experience, I think it would be best if you kind of gave yourselves a brief introduction. So we'll start with Lee. Why don't you go ahead and let the audience know who's listening and watching what you're all about.
Okay, first of all, I want to do a quick correction. My name is Lee Duncan. You've been mispronouncing my name all this time, and I just want to set the record straight.
Okay, I'm gonna go this way and hide for a bit, since I can't get the
I was joking with him this morning, Robert, that I refer to him now as the Lee Duncan.
Oh, okay. So there's a the there. All right. Now I have to understand the preface of it, so I got it. Good. Please continue. Lee Duncan. I do not want to upset the flow of this.
Yeah. No problem. My feelings are hurt, but I can move on. Okay, so what I do is I do design things. That's typically how I explain myself. I have been with IBM actually 20 years, an extremely long time. And within that space, I have done work in Agile, course design, and most recently in design sprints. And right now I'm focusing all my time, energy, and experimentation on enterprise design sprints. Specifically, how do you organize design sprints for the specific challenge of an enterprise?
And how does that approach differ from, say, regular design sprints, for those that aren't quite familiar with the enterprise versions?
Mostly because there are different silos involved. The problems can be more complex. The funding and where it comes from and the approvers can be much more complex. The degree of complexity, I'm going to say complex a few hundred more times here. The complexity of the challenges can be differentiated. And for example, we're doing some things with AI, and AI, there's a lot of experts within IBM we need to draw from. So there is a lot of pre-work and figuring out who is the right person to have in the room without going overboard. Mm-hmm. Many times with enterprise design sprints, we say we're going to be doing a sprint, and about 50 people want to get involved, which I think is more than Jake Knapp's goal of having 5. So what we've had to work through, how do we be very selective on having the right people? How do we manage that? And also we're a globally integrated enterprise. We have between 300,000 and 400,000 employees. So the chance of having a person on the other side of the earth at the exact opposite time of the day is very probable. So we're trying to navigate that out and then optimize the sprint to arrive at a high fidelity prototype, one that we can deliver quickly and one that utilizes the technology that IBM has.
Got it. One of the things I really enjoy about being in your network, Lee, is that I can get a really good sense of what you're paying attention to in the industry just by following you on LinkedIn. Some of the stuff that you like or that you comment on is really intriguing because it spans so many different technologies and so many interests. So even if you're not a part of Lee's network, that's something I would recommend even if you don't know who he is, just following him and seeing what he kind of pays attention to is really interesting. So I'll say that outside of enterprise design sprints, your particular perspective and view on things is really interesting. So there you go. So let's with that kind of introduction, or at least that ending of it, let's go over to David.
Hi.
You can tell us what he's all about.
Yes, I'm all about my family, sleep, and work.
Wow, we're done.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah. I try to keep
everybody.
it simple. I try to keep it simple. I have an interesting path and journey. I actually started out in banking and got kind of cut my teeth right out of school. I was trained as an economics major, and I studied English literature. And I got a job supporting a very successful bond trading business right out of school, and kind of developed my experience in that kind of industry for about half of my career. And then the market kind of dictated that our services were no longer needed at a point in time around 2007 and 2008. And I had a chance to reinvent myself as a management consultant. And I did that for about 12 years, working and helping clients solve business issues and reach a desired outcome. And it took a number of different paths, traditional business analysis, some project management, some program management, and along the way, some advisory work, advising clients. Because of my background and expertise and domain that I had in that space, I was able to be invited to some really interesting conversations over time with clients that were looking to move some mountains. And it was some pretty interesting work. And about 2 years ago, I struck out on my own and started Crystal Cove Consulting. And around 2 years ago, I did my first design sprint and had a really excellent experience working with the team that we mobilized to respond. It was a kind of short runway. And, really me being the type of person that I am, really enjoyed working with people and following, to the T, the formula and the recipe that Jake Knapp provided in Sprint Book, and really thrived off seeing the alignment and seeing the energy of the room, and how it was really nice to see how people could work together when they broke down some of the traditional barriers of hierarchy, and there was alignment, and everybody had skin in the game and felt empowered to vote and help provide a solution for the particular client that we were on at the point in time. So that was my introduction to design sprints. And, commercially speaking, we have an advisory. Crystal Cove Consulting has an advisory and management consultancy. And it's one of the tools that we use and we talk to clients about. A lot of my clients are interested in where they can introduce design sprints to help in different points in delivery or execution, as well as they want to talk to me about how, as teams, they can work smarter and more efficiently. Just last week, I was, after we came back from Colorado, the morning after on Thursday, I was in Manhattan speaking with a client about a program that they're currently managing around data strategy. And they were very interested into understanding different tools and thinking a little bit differently as a team and how they can work more efficiently. So that's how design sprints come into play in my day-to-day.
Yeah, and one of the conversations we had when we were in Denver was, and you reminded me of it because we had spoken of it before, was your use of a technique called Lightning Decision Jam to
Yes.
kind of bring everyone together around a common, unified either problem or vision or idea. Can you kind of explain how you've integrated that into your work a bit?
Yeah. So I'm doing it pretty much on when I first started out in the first year, I was doing that on a weekly basis for myself, just trying to keep myself honest and disciplined and have a regular cadence to check in with myself, because I felt like I had been moving out of the problem I was concerned about is that when you're working for a larger team or organization on the management consultancy side, you have a lot more bandwidth and resources at your disposal, and a lot people dedicated to sales, for example, and people writing content. And when you're smaller, you don't have the luxury of all those resources helping you out. So for Crystal Cove, I use that as a tool for myself to keep myself, force myself into understanding feedback that I'm receiving on my go-to-market strategy and our offerings. And I found that very, very useful. And I've actually used that for a couple of clients to help them just in a matter of like 30 minutes or 45 minutes, go through and understand what the problem is they're trying to address and come up with a high-level solution from that. And it's been very effective. And I think what I try to do is I kind of throw that out as a free exercise for them, just to understand some of the tools and some of the process through which we would be going by, if not an LDJ, but potentially a design sprint at a later point in time, or possibly another tool or methodology that we would use to help them be very precise on how they want to plan, or how they want to address or isolate or ring fence an issue that they want to try to solve for. Or in most of my clients, go to an executive committee and request some funding for. So it's been a tool that's I've leveraged in a lot of different instances to show and tout some of these design thinking tools in an industry and for some clients that previously wouldn't have used these tools. And I've had a lot of success with that.
Do you find it's an effective trust building tool for yourself?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Without question. Without question. I think while we're in Colorado, we talked to a couple of practitioners that were using that or different forms of an LDJ or problem framing exercises, for example, that they were using to demonstrate that with a little time and a little focus and with a team and you know, some probing and working through the exercises, it was a really rewarding experience, both for a vendor trying to sell into a client, but also for a client to understand how quickly people, you know, how precise the questions can be and how quickly people can, like I said, ring fence an issue or something that needs to be addressed or have better form on something.
Yeah, I'm aligned with that completely, because I've encountered the same thing. I found that this has not only does it bridge a lot of gaps around understanding of what everyone's concentrating on, but this method, or at least even hybrids of it, seem to pervade across disciplines and across industries, finance, construction, telecom. I mean, all over the place. It just seems like a common tool where you take out a lot of the conjecture in the discussion and really get down to brass tacks of, well, what's important to people. In fact, there was a financial lightning decision jam I did a month ago where people were shocked. They were CFOs, CTOs, people that were you know, in leadership positions that were used to a lot of like debate around where to go and how to do things. But at the end of that, everyone was totally surprised, because not only did they go through everything, they were aligned on two central ideas. I mean, everybody on the call, we're talking about at least 10 different people from multiple different aspects. And it's really, really interesting when it comes together like that.
Just to let you know, also on Friday, I did a circularity exam on the circular economy, how to make regenerative solutions, and how to think of things from a different perspective than the normal linear way of use and dispose and throw away. So very similar to Lightning Decision Jam, we did one for the circular economy, name things that are happening right now, bad actors within the enterprise, not people, but bad ways of acting, I suppose, in creating solutions, and then ways of reimagining that. So we did
You know, Robert, and Lee, one of the things, I think I mentioned this to Lee, and I may have mentioned this to you over dinner, Robert, while we were in Colorado. The most rewarding use of an LDJ that I've kind of encountered over the past 2 months, call it, was I'm actually the PTA treasurer for my son's school in my downtime. And we as a board got together during the summertime, and we had a chance what we're trying to do is come up with goals, deliverable goals that we wanted to communicate to administration as well as to our members. And I used an LDJ there. And I tell you, the board was so pumped and enthusiastic after a couple of minutes. And it was very nice to expose people to that way of thinking and problem solving as well. And, you know, just the nature of being on the PTA board, it was very rewarding for me. And, you know, just wanted to share that with everybody. That was the most rewarding application over the past 2 months that I've used.
The most memorable one, I can speak it, for me was using that process with 6 to 10-year-old kids, and just showing them what the process was about and letting it be open-ended. And I chose vacation spots. You would never have guessed, but the most popular vacation spot outside of Hawaii was a trash can, because they were just having fun with it. So they would actually try to curry favor with other kids around, yeah, a trash can is better than Hawaii. But it got them on the idea that it was a democratic way of making a decision that everyone had input into. And some people would use like images and other aspects of communication, but it was fascinating to see people that were completely outside my age group going after this process and making it their own. So it's pretty interesting.
Speaking of trash cans,
let's jump into the conference, the Google Design Sprint Conference that happened in Boulder, Colorado last week. A lot of really impressive presentations that all of us saw. A lot of insight into different perspectives and processes. I wanted to get an impression from both of you on what really stood out to you about that conference. Were there particular individuals or particular talks that still stick with you to this day? Let's start with you, David. What are some things that really that still kind of keep with you in your mind, even as we speak?
So I got to hand it to Kai and the Google Design Relations team. They changed the format from last year. I wasn't at the first, or I think it was the first or the year prior to that. And I really thought that it was responding to what people were asking for. And by having these deep dive sessions on both days, it created a situation where anybody that was participating was actively learning. And I thought that was very fulfilling for me as a participant and as somebody that was on site to try to stretch myself and then also learn as much as possible. And so that was really, really nice. Also, I thought that the demographic had a lot of, it was very balanced, and there were some very senior level people, design thinkers, practitioners, people that are commercially running these week in, week out, or doing coaching, as well as people that are maybe new either to design space or design sprint space. And I felt that in every single deep dive session. And I thought that was really special to me, because I felt like a lot of times when you had breakout sessions with groups, the people on the team, it was a really nice way to get feedback from all different levels. And for me, that was very, very rewarding. Rodney Evans, who delivered the keynote speech, was, in my mind, she killed it. And I was really, really inspired, as well as Bree as well, Bree Goff.
Yeah, I
thought was really, really awesome. And, you know, I can't say enough about Nevada Lane, who I took a course, one of the day one kind of pre-conference courses on graphic recording. I thought they did an awesome job on teaching some of the finer points about graphic recording, which was very, very useful to me as a practitioner to upskill how I conduct workshops or how I do some whiteboarding, and reiterated a couple of things that I knew, but taught me a couple of things that I didn't know. And I thought that that was really, really helpful. And I don't know if I mentioned it already, but I really, really enjoyed Ross Chapman's deep dive workshop. It was really, really rewarding.
Yep. Agree on all of those. How about you, Lee?
Yeah, pretty much everything Dave said. Everything was encapsulated there that you would need. And I thought it was quite interesting that no matter where you came from, there was something for you. What I was looking for this year was all things enterprise. And there was essentially an enterprise track. You could pick sessions that would focus on all the tough challenges that a large company would face. But also there were challenges that you would have if you were in an agency or just as an individual trying to upskill. For example, there was discussions on improv, and another thing that I take away from it is that everyone was so open and willing to share. People were making things to hand out. Steph, as everyone knows, he had the sprint quarter. He was handing that out. Everyone had something to share, something to bring, and I just thought the sense of community was next level, honestly. And if I had to call out one specific session, it would definitely be the Rodney Evans one on reinventing the organization. Every element of that was precise, from the way she was communicating to the material she had, how she communicated it, how she answered questions, how she came across. She basically just nailed it in every single way. So I was just trying to take that in and take notes. And if I was forced to pick one specific session, that was the one that stood out to me.
Maybe a potential future podcast in interviewee, more or less.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then one other thing I'll say is I found it quite surprising that she lives about 20 to 30 miles from me. And we were thinking that we were on the other side of we were separated by large distances, but actually she's close by. So I'm hoping to join some of her meetups.
That would be awesome, especially if you get the chance to meet her face to face in a meetup. That would be perfect.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, I'll put my 2 cents in and I'll say I agree with both of you so that we can give you as much time as possible in our session, because the thing that I remember the most, and this is just outside of the context, was being able to meet people in person for the first time. A lot of my work is almost always online just because that's the nature of what I do. So meeting people like David and Lee, we met before briefly when he came by, like Douglas and Amir, was great to meet him. There was Dana, just a host of different people, and just getting the chance just to meet them in person while they were there. Sabrina Gorich, yeah, I'm forgetting names, but that was the highlight, is being able to just have at least 5 to 10 minutes at the very least with a lot of them to talk about whatever we came to mind, but just to be around that group was again, to your point, Lee, about community, it was pretty nice. And hats off to Kai and Felix for organizing and making this thing a reality. Right, so from there, let's get into Experiences of Insight, which is the podcast that both of you host. And I believe, how many episodes are you into now? Are you 10 episodes in at this point?
That's right.
Okay, getting my numbers right. So let's back up a little bit and talk about what led the both of you to create this podcast. What was its inception? Why did you decide to go down this path of making a podcast for the both of you? And either one of you can speak up.
Lee, you want to take it?
Okay. Yeah, so honestly, it was probably the last sprint conference. Again, this is an example of when you bring people together, they're able to talk more. You're able to develop a deeper connection, develop trust, have an understanding of where you want to go. And I think at that last sprint last year or immediately after, Dave came to me and said, given the fact that we are starting to develop some connections through Sprint and other places, we have a responsibility to share that information and bring their stories forward. And there is a pretty substantial unmet need with allowing them to provide some of the backdrop on how they, what's behind what they are today, what have been their experiences, what have been their experiences of insight, and can we trace that back to a particular moment? If we can help people accelerate their learning curve and get to where they are faster through them telling their story, then that's something we should do. And I believe that was that was kind of the origin story.
That's it. And basically, I mean, honestly, it was literally, hey, we know some really interesting, fascinating people that are doing some great work, and we admire them as people. We see them in the community. And if we can do anything to give them a platform to talk about the work that they're doing and literally share with us experiences of insight, their experiences of insight. And if somebody listening somewhere is able to listen and be inspired, or maybe work differently or think differently or follow up and research something themselves, and even if it's 1% or inside of 10% of the content that we have on each episode, then that's a pretty cool, compelling story. And I will also say, Robert, that you were an inspiration to me personally, as well as many other life instances that I had throughout my life in understanding, listening to public radio, or understanding, college radio when I was in school. But most recently, the work that you were doing, in addition to other podcasters, has really inspired me to take a stab at it and figure out a way. It's very empowering with technology and the access to tools that people have, what can be done on a very small budget.
I appreciate it, David. And I what I like the most about the podcast is the idea that it centers on the tenet of open dialogue. Whether it's your own perspective or the perspective of your guests, that you focus on things like learning and innovation. I mean, it comes across, especially with the one episode I remember from Mariana Suarez Baton, someone who's very much a person that thinks of things in different dimensions and is very, very much a conversationalist. The kinds of topics that you've taken on in the podcast, and I'm looking forward to future ones. I mean, because it's not just about design sprints or design or, particular processes, but you try to also go into business, to communication. I mean, some of those people I've got lined up with the GVDS Presents would be perfect for this podcast as well. But I know that the both of you have a particular idea of the type of guest you want to have. So it's not kind of like a catch-all. You really want to be particular about who you're bringing on. So that's what makes your particular conversations interesting, in that it's well thought out. It's not just, okay, let's get somebody that sounds interesting.
Yes,
So,
and I just also want to extend on, we'll just flip back to the Sprint. So you said Mariano, we forgot to mention Mural was there. And so, yeah, everything back at Sprint was there. Mural went through all their, through the methods that have been helping people do design sprints. So that was really useful. But definitely, I think if you were to take a look at the waveform of people on our podcast, we give them a lot of time to tell their story. And just as you said, it's not always on subject matter where we're serving the public. Actually, many times, Dave and I just want to know more about them. We give them space to tell their story, and we just want to understand them a little better, find their background. And many times in the other podcasts, there just isn't time to do that, and they don't allow people to navigate their experiences in the way that that they want to. So we try to afford them that opportunity.
So if you were to have your wish list of the top 3 for each of you that you'd like to have on your podcast, and it can pervade any industry, any level of expertise, you could just get 3 people that would be willing and saying yes to come on your podcast, who would those individuals be? I'm going to go with David first on this.
So one that I've been chasing is Monica Bielskite. She's a futurist. I really admire her work and her courage, and everything that she's put out. She spoke, I think it was in the springtime, at Google in San Fran. She's on her way to Oslo right now to speak. So I really have been following her story. And like I say, the key thing there is she is so courageous and just on it from a content perspective. I think that fits within the what we're trying to deliver to our listeners, from the standpoint of somebody that could share with us their experiences of insight, and something that any listener could definitely latch on to, some nuggets that would be very thought-provoking. We actually locked in a couple of episodes that will be coming up before the end of the year, and that kind of fit within the sweet spot. And I don't want to tell the names of the individuals, but one of them is I had dinner with him in Boulder, and Lee and I had breakfast with him on the last day of the Sprint conference. He's actually he's a friend of ours, and he has a biotech company, and he's doing some really interesting work in studying DNA, and also bringing different tools to the market to help on detection as well as remediating issues, inconsistencies with DNA structure. And I thought that, his work and his life story from where he comes from and how he got to where he is right now is very compelling. And we also have a couple of people that will be talking to us about their impact in the environmental space, whether that's landscape design overseas in China, and how they're helping design how water would flow from tributaries or rivers, and how that factors into some of the planning that's going on over there. As well as like how there's somebody in the South that we will be interviewing and be releasing before the end of the year, that their job, their sole function is to help an enterprise think and be greener. And that's some of the stuff that we'll be working through. And then also we have a few, because of where, like I was saying, we have some really interesting friends in the community. We've got a couple of artists as well as musicians that we will be including as well. So I don't want to name the names. I know you asked for specific names, but we want to give people a platform, and we want to have a wide array of guests. And we hope to bring them all together to share them with our listeners.
Sounds good. Lee, do you want to add anything to that, or do you think David's pretty much said it succinctly?
I think he said succinctly. Let me just add a couple names. So I'm really I have diverse interests. I do a lot of experiments with longevity, and I've done a lot of things that people look at me sideways when I tell them what I do in regards to nutrition and other things. But Dave Sinclair, who is an absolute genius in regards to longevity. Peter Attia is another absolute brilliant mind. Kai, I would love to have on our show someday. And Ryan Holiday, Ego is the Enemy, because I believe ego dissolution is one of the most important things a designer can do. Can you remove your ego? Can you have an understanding of what your biases are? And if you're able to do that, you're going to be able to design so much better. So those are some of the folks I would invite.
Interesting. So all we have to do is just send them the URL for this podcast, not podcast, but the broadcast of this, so they can listen back and go, oh, okay, great. Yeah, I'll go ahead and sign up for a recording, and that'll work. Right?
Exactly.
Okay, so I have a couple more questions, but I'm going to mix those into the questions that came in through registration. And if you're listening right now on YouTube or are part of the Zoom crew that pre-registered in advance for this, feel free to post your questions as they come. I'll be checking all three of those platforms for quotes of insight, even though I wanted to use experience of insight, it didn't really work. So let's start with one from Jerome Vermouw. He's from the Netherlands. He's someone that's very involved with the Global Virtual Design Sprint. I think we all know him. His question from that he posted earlier was, how would you like to be thought of 50 years from now? So let's say we're all rocking the chairs and we're looking back on what we've done with our lives. For the both of you gentlemen, we'll start with Lee. Where do you want to be? How do you want to be looked on, or how would you like to reflect back on your life 50 years from now?
Yeah, I would like to be looked at as a courageous experimenter, a person that was willing to go anywhere, wherever was necessary to find truth, to uncover new ways of doing things, to innovate in ways that were uncommon.
Right. And David?
I just I just want people, when they think of me, to think, I knew Dave Magdaleno over time, and he was a really kind person and a really thoughtful person, and he treated people with respect. And I hope that 50 years from now, you know, my sons have that same opinion about me. And if, you know, wherever they are, that's the most important measure for me right now.
So Ryan Demetz from AJ and Smart wrote in and said, in 50 years from now, I won't be sprinting, I'll be rolling.
Yeah, I was doing the math when you asked that question in my head, and I'm like, man, I'm going to be really old. And it's funny because I had a conversation with my father last night, and he lives in Southern California, and he's going to be pushing 80. He's going to be hitting 80 next year. And he stopped, he retired at a pretty reasonable age. And that Southern California living and de-stressing and everything has done him wonders. And I often joke with him that, you know, the rate I'm going right now, he might outlive me.
Interesting. I always think that it would be fun to just spread some rumors, some positive rumors about my existence, even though people might not remember my history. Like if I can somehow convince people that I dunked on LeBron at some point in my life, then, you know, just like a scrimmage game, nobody saw it, wasn't filmed, you know, outside 80% out of the realm of possibility, but there is a slight chance, just a little, that it may be true, then that might be fun. So I can look back in my life and say like, well, it's full of stories, both true and not true, but you'll figure out which ones make sense and don't.
I mean, honestly, well, what about you, Robert? I mean, I know you mentioned that piece about LeBron, like a little myth. You know, is it really true about Robert? Did he really dunk? You know, at one point in time, what do you, you know, if not 50 years from now, let's say when you reach 80 or 90, like what would you hope that people carry forward when thinking about you?
That I was a good father. That's about it. All of this stuff that I'm doing right now is within the moment and the element of living in the now and taking advantage of what I think is best and what I can do well and what I can contribute to not only the people that I know, but also within the industry that I decide to get involved with. But when it comes down to it, I want to be remembered as someone that did well by his kids and by his family. That's pretty much it. If I can have that legacy to be remembered in a positive way, knowing that I'm going to make mistakes like everyone does, I would want to say that I put my best foot forward with raising my kid. That's it. And that he's happy, no matter what he decides to do with himself. I think that's probably the best thing I could probably hope for. Then I can step out of a straw and, you know, do drag racing with Ryan sometime and like mechanized wheelchairs. I'm definitely going to have rockets and machine guns on my side. Like, totally decked out like a Hot Wheels car.
You know, going back to what we were talking about in the Sprint conference, just bringing back, you just made me think about this, and I know we talked about this a little bit, the three of us at different points. I was really inspired because one of the things I do as an entrepreneur commercially is I have a couple of projects that I work on with my wife, Soleil, who's my, you know, is the glue that keeps the household together.
Very nice name, by the way. I'll put that out there.
Yeah, she's really very inspiring to me and keeps me going and keeps me together. And I don't know what I do without her, and I'm very thankful for her. And my dad, when he was out in July from California visiting us for my youngest son's second birthday, he was remarking that I'm very lucky, you know, based off what I get to do, but also that I get to work with my wife on some commercial projects. And there were a couple of instances, you know, whether it's Steph and Igle or if it's John and Dina, I believe it's Dina Vatan. You know, there are a lot of examples of people in the design community working together as partners, both professionally and personally, and Thorsten as well, and Tomas. I thought that was very inspiring to see people working that way. And also the people that I talk to on a personal level outside from the deep dives, you know, I know we're all cut from a similar grain in that we really want to be there for our family. And that is a very central guiding light for us. Family first, and trying to maximize our time and our utility from our family time. It's really nice to be in that community. A lot of my clients in some of the different sectors that I've been exposed to, sometimes those priorities aren't as evident and aren't always there. And it's really nice to be in a community where people have similar values.
I'm not feeling very good about myself.
Yep, I agree.
I'm not feeling very good about myself after hearing you talking about being the best dad ever and hugs and love. And I'm talking about, I want to live forever. I can never die.
Well, wait a minute. Hold on. You may be in good company because Amir Arab, Arabson. I don't know if it's Arab or Arabson. I think I've seen both.
He's not here. You can say whatever we want. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you can't speak up beyond typing. He says in 50 years from now, he's going to be 90% cyborg. So he's got the same idea you have, in the sense he wants to, Arab, there you go. So he corrected me. That he wants to basically live forever through cybernetics. So he's really on the term. Actually, he would, to be honest with you, Amir would make an amazing Terminator. He would just basically he would have like his own soundtrack. He could basically walk around. He wouldn't necessarily knock people off. He'd just kind of rough them up a bit. But
no, he'd be like the cool guy. He's so cool. And that is one person I was really glad to meet him in face to face. And he's so kind and gentle, and he's got a really nice demeanor. And he would just be the cool guy that would mosey up to a bar, and they'd be like, "Oh, you're that half cyborg. No cyborg served here." But he'd start talking, and then they'd be like, "But we'll make an exception for you because you're so cool."
No. What he would do is basically like you see in the movies. You just go, "Hey, how's it going? I just need your clothes, your boots, and your hat before I get out of here." His delivery would be a little bit different.
Yes. By the way, is there a post-humanist global?
It is like straightforward and like a matter of factly and very direct.
But Robert, is there a post-humanist group for your global virtual design sprint? Because it sounds like there may be a few cyborgs.
Maybe I'm just this is the beginning of Skynet, where really I'm talking about humans communicating with one another online. I'm just in that big giant grouping of all of us kind of engaging in a VR world, and eventually the machines go there too, and it's done. So maybe they're going to look back in history and say, you know what, that screwball that was down in Dallas started this whole damn thing with machines basically taking over, and be like, what can you do? I did my best. I'm still a decent father, even though I caused the destruction of the world. Who knows? Yes, and Amir says, killing them softly. There you go. Okay, so let's switch tactics a little bit and get in a little bit into what's coming up in 2020 for both of you. So we talked about the podcast, but I know that both of you are doing several different things in your particular space. So you're making plans to potentially get involved with some events. Maybe, David, I think you're going to be expanding a bit, but why don't you get a bit into what you're planning on doing into 2020, what you've been thinking about? And let's start with David and see, tell us what you got planned for next year.
Sure. So I'm actually going to be embarking on some really interesting work for enterprise client very shortly here. I think I kind of mentioned it when we came back from the Sprint conference. Had a follow-up conversation with them, and I'm looking forward to helping them from a data strategy perspective. That's something that I'm really looking forward to sink my teeth in. There's a really great team at this company, and they're doing some really great work, and they're thinking about things very creatively. And I'm really excited to help them facilitate and execute on what they need to do. A lot of my clients, most of the work that they're doing is on the banking and financial services side, is in response to a commitment that they have to a regulator like the Federal Reserve. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be a real interesting, I would say, maybe inside of a year. So there's that. And then also commercially, Crystal Cove and my wife, we started a business up in Massachusetts, and we will be advising a company that has a jewelry business up there, some of the rebranding. I don't know too much about jewelry or the jewelry business, but it has deeply established roots, about 40 or 50 years in Western Massachusetts. And a really great story that it's a showcase that combines artisans from the local area that create jewelry, different pieces from scratch, all handmade. And we'll be working on that together, which is really, really exciting. And then the last thing is just figuring out little triggers or little switches that I can turn on to make the podcast that much better for everybody that's listening. Lee and I have been, every time we meet, it seems like we talk about little things that we can be doing to make the experience better for the people that come on board and talk with us, or people that are listening. And we hope that we can do that. And last thing, I just thought of this, is as much as I don't like to travel too much, I'm gonna make an effort this year to speak a little bit more for some of my clients and some of the conferences specific to whether it's banking and financial services, or technology summits, or I participate in the Enterprise Data Management Council. So looking for opportunities to partner with them and speak to a wider audience about some of the work that I've done in the past or I'm currently doing, and some of the tools that I'm leveraging to help spread the message of how to, there is a different way to work, and helping people understand what that might look like.
Sounds great. It sounds like you're gonna stay busy.
A little bit.
Right. All right, Lee, what do you got coming up?
Okay, so what I want to do is I want to develop a playbook for the enterprise, how to run enterprise design sprints, how to do it under different types of scenarios. And I'm developing specific types of sprints for, well, I'm actually calling them deep sprints. And they are different ways of structuring a sprint for artificial intelligence, machine learning types of things, blockchain, robotics and automation, on and on. The areas which we in our enterprise are focusing on, and they have very specific needs in regards to how you set up the sprint, how you align, how do you get approval, all the things I said at the beginning. So one, a playbook for scaling to ensure other people can do it well. And I also want to make sure that that I clarify and I articulate in writing how that should be done. But also I want to come up with a custom design sprint for very deep content, complex systems, and bring in the right experts at the right time.
So how much of this is going to be conceptual versus something you're going to experiment with to see, after you kind of curate or figure out a process, how it actually executes?
So I'm experimenting on myself right now, along, in normal fashion, like with all the weird longevity nutrition things. I use myself as the first experiment. So it's going well so far. But before I publish that information, I want to make sure that I've thought of everything. And I'm sure there are a few scenarios which are waiting to come along that will force me to reflect on the decisions I've made and how I'm going about it. But I would imagine over the next few months, I will start publishing, at least internally, and then hopefully externally soon.
So is the hesitation to publish until it's completely done based on the audience that you're intending this for, or is it because you have a certain quality standard that you want to hit before you feel like it's ready for the public?
I feel like I have a responsibility to, if I'm going to put something out there, that I've thought it through, and I don't want people to make mistakes, and I certainly don't want that. I don't want them to have a bad experience, and I want them to be able to deliver a good product at the end. And just my personal responsibility. I feel like I want to make sure that I've been diligent and I put it together. And then also, by the way technology is moving very quick, and I still have to get a lot more reps in to make sure I'm comfortable. I would also love to do a quantum design sprint. That's something I'm trying to set up right now.
Wow,
one of the first.
That would be really interesting.
I'd love to be the first ever in history to do a quantum design sprint. So those are some things that I still need to finalize and finish and get done.
here's a thought too, like, and I'll say really fast that Amir made a comment that he's working on something similar with his design team. So maybe the two of you can have a conversation offline at some point.
Yep.
I think that the label of design sprint may be something that eventually evolves, where you may actually take that phrase and recast it in something that may be more appropriate for quantum work or with AI or something else. But it's something branded in such a way so that it takes those tenets that you normally find in a design sprint, but modifies them, since now you're doing it in a completely different realm of doing things.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll turn that design back at myself. Words become things. So to make that whole process more accessible, we probably have to change the terminology, the language, so people can understand it and it's available to all.
Yeah, I think so too. But it's evolving the language to suit the new processor approach of kind of going about things. But that's one of those things where if you had a subscriber list, you should, like, even a mailing list or something where you don't necessarily have to give updates, but if you came out with anything that, you know, I'd be the first in line to kind of read it or look at it. So
I'm trying to talk him into writing a book, Robert.
I think the both of us can kind of apply like gentle pressure to Lee, because he's somebody that's probably as intense as can be with what he needs to do. But I know that eventually it'll happen. It maybe even not in a book. It could be in another format, but it's coming. There's too much going on with Lee in terms of how smart he is that he should not. I was going to do a double negative. That it would be a disservice to humanity if he didn't contribute something in the discourse of what he's involved with for other people to at least look at in the now, and then also consider from the historical perspective of how things have come along. At least that's
yeah, and you already hear that he's already got it. He's already wired that way and thinking that way. Like, I feel like I have an obligation to the people, and it's nice and refreshing to hear that. You're right. It's probably just a matter of time.
It's a matter of time. It just when he's ready, he'll be ready. But when it comes out, everyone's going to suddenly be one of those things where we have to actually like figure out when we're going to have time in his schedule to talk with him. It'll be like months down the road or something, because everyone will be wanting to talk to him about to get his perspective. But that's in the future. For now, everyone's good.
Robert, you're getting a head start. You're getting a head start on that misinformation that you're talking about. You know, you wanted to spread misinformation. You're actually getting quite a good jump start on that.
No. That's for me. That's not for anybody else. I would necessarily want to like project that on anyone else. But we only have a few minutes left. I do want to get to one last question that Jerome had posted, and it's he wrote that there's a trend of quote unquote democratic design, and the design sprint is helping in that. And he says he also hears design leaders and corporates say that democratic is not always good, as it reduces surprise, out of the box, and unique solutions. Well, I guess we'll start with Lee on this. What's your view on that particular point of view?
Well, I think one of the best, it's not exciting phraseology, but radical alignment, I've said this before, many other people have said it, is one of the most important elements of a design sprint, getting people in the room and being able to talk about it. Because when you have separate conversations, even if they're good ones with smart people, the information is not shared. You don't develop that shared brain. And so I think it's important for all members to have access to the same information, to be able to process it at the same time, have the same level of head start on thinking it through. And then I think it's important to have a mechanism for sorting it out and getting to a decision where everyone has a say and has the same level of influence on the outcome.
Very well put. David, what are your thoughts?
I think it's extremely important, and some of the work that Lee and I have done in the past, you know, we constantly talk about the benefit of having people, giving people a seat at the table, regardless of where they come to the conversation from, and the outcome most of the time has been it's been consistently positive, and whether that's like in the experience, the working experience, but also looking at some of the work we did for Miracle, for example, and bringing Lee, myself, Bill, Alexi to the table to work together in a short period of time, coming from different disciplines and different backgrounds, and kind of putting our heads together and coming up with an awesome product. And you know, that's an example and a testament to it. I think it's very important. And I would also say that some of the steps that Jake outlined in the sprint book around some of the pre-work and some of the messaging that needs to happen up front to ensure that the concept of corporate hierarchy doesn't make its way into the room that you're working from is extremely important and extremely rewarding. And it's I love working that way myself. So I've really been a fan of it.
Fantastic. The podcast is called Experiences of Insight. You can find it on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, pretty much any podcast distribution that's around, but those are the main two you can find it at. I'd like to thank you both for coming on to the GVDS Presents session. Everyone on YouTube that's been tuning in to listen to this, thank you for submitting your questions and your comments. It's been great having you both here. I'll basically, in the show notes, make sure I cover all of your different links, including to the podcast, your LinkedIn profiles, as well as anything else you'd like me to include. But again, it's been wonderful talking to you both again since we last spoke in Denver, or in Boulder, sorry. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the week. If you have any parting quotes or thoughts, please feel free to make them before we close out.
Robert is awesome. He's a great, kind person. But you know that. But you know.
Okay. But thank you.
Robert, thank you very much, as always, for thinking of us and giving us a chance to come on and speak about the work that we're doing in our platform. I really appreciate your kindness and your openness. And then also, I really appreciate the work that you're doing for the community. I'm not just saying that. I'd say the same thing to you face to face or over dinner. And thank you for being awesome.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm more than happy to do these kinds of sessions with you guys. Anytime you want to come back or we want to have something else in the future, please reach out. Again, thank you very much for coming on. I hope you two have a wonderful week, and I'm sure we'll talk later on. Okay, bye everybody watching. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for coming on. Adios.
Adios.
Bye.
Ciao.